Hello, Cancer Warriors. This is Tonya with Power Pantaloons podcast. Today we have special guest Ross with us. Welcome to the program.
Hey, how you doing?
Why don't you tell the audience what your zone of genius is?
Oh, so what I typically work on right now is I'm a coach and a public speaker, and I pretty much just talk to those individuals about overcoming and building resilience. And there's multiple paths you could take, de- determining on the environment you grew up in, trauma you took on, experiences that you've had. There's multiple roads you could take on it, and I like to just kind of go the two extremes. You could either take the road to help others out and be beneficial, or you do the opposite of that and a lot of times become a number or statistic.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I could see how building resilience would be super important for everybody. Uh, but I can see also how it plays in with people who have been diagnosed with cancer and how your mindset really does set the tone for the entire experience.
Yes. Yes, like everything is mindset, right? Even whether you're studying for a test, whether let's say right now it's January 3rd and people are trying to work on their resolutions. And I actually shared something to my social media pages, something that I thought about. It said if you're not, you can make a resolution, but if you're not mentally prepared and don't have everything in order for that resolution, you're just lying to yourself again, right? So, having a strong mindset, or just a mindset saying, I want to do this, right? You don't have to have a strong mindset initially. Let's say a type of person that says, man, like I've never finished anything. Well, make it to where you're going to finish this, right? I'm going to finish this. So, when you put your mind to something, you could achieve a great deal of things. I know that, for instance, you and I, before the podcast started, we talked about, your adopted child and what you did in how short a period of time. Like, you put your mind to it, and you had other things going on, within that week too, within the 7 day period. And we could achieve a lot as individuals, as people, when we put our mind to something. So I've also heard stories of people just being able to overcome cancer, with their mindset, right? Like, on the cancer, and how many people's health deteriorated after they found out they got cancer, because it's like a lot of, like from one day to the next. And I've never had cancer, but I just kind of think about that, because most men, we don't like going to doctors, right? And
Not just men. It's
not
not
just
just men. It's
but
not.
it's always most, oh well, this is wrong with you, and now you've been hit with something up here that you weren't expecting. And it's like, now this something's a reality you didn't intend on to be a reality, and it really changes your outlook on yourself, and so yeah.
Yeah. So I could speak a lot about that. When a doctor says you have cancer, and I've spoken to a lot of survivors, and their response is the same as what mine was. You don't hear anything else. The doctor keeps talking, and it's Charlie Brown's teacher. Womp, 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 womp. You don't hear any other words coming out of the doctor's mouth. And sometimes it takes a very long time for you to actually take a real breath again. And I think your mental status has a play in that. I had a good friend take me to that appointment. She was a former nurse, and she knew the writing on the wall. I was clueless. So she gathered all of the information from the doctor for me during that visit. And then when we got back to her house, she sat me down. She's like, okay, today is the only day you are allowed to scream at God, be mad, the why me's, all of that bullshit. Tomorrow we're waking up and you're going to kick cancer's ass. And with that, she helped me start the right mindset, like start on the right foot for my cancer journey. And I feel that like I would have been there anyway, but she definitely helped supported me with that. One of the big things for me, the only thing that I did consistently the entire journey. It wasn't every day, but it was pretty close. When I woke up, um, I would visualize that I was putting on a pair of Wonder Woman's underwear when I changed my underwear. And that's because for me, Wonder Woman doesn't die. So that was the physical representation of me actively deciding to live every day. And it's a choice, right? Like I chose to not hear expiration dates, um, not put up with anybody mourning me while I was standing in front of them, because that's just not how it was going to go.
Hmm.
I did attempt to go to a couple of cancer support groups, but everybody there, all they wanted to do was whine about the fact that they had cancer. Nobody wanted to talk about alternative wellness modalities. Nobody wanted to talk about mindset. They just wanted to literally stew in their diagnosis. And I was like, nope, get me the F out of here. I can't, because I didn't want that to influence my my vibe, my mindset, because
Yeah,
you
you
behave
didn't want to be
like
extra. You said misery has enough company. I'm not going to be in here.
the people you hang around with.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if you want better habits, hang around with people who have better habits.
Yeah.
It's a choice. You can find that. So yeah, like it's a choice,
Yeah.
literally a choice.
Everything is a choice. Like my father, he was paralyzed at the age of 5, or when I was 5. I'm sorry. So he was 56, 55, 56, and he had me later on in life. My mom was like 20 years younger, but man, he didn't let that deter him. He was paralyzed on the left side of his body, but he was the guy that was super active. Even when he had a stroke, like he's paralyzed now, like because he was always so active. But he had a very strong mindset, like super strong mindset, and always try to find the positive in things. And of course, he'd have those days, but he was paralyzed on his left side from '88 to he passed away in 2013. That's a long time, you
Yeah,
know. And
yeah,
so yeah, I mean, but he definitely taught me a lot about mindset as far as like, things always be worse, but you're totally right. You are who you hang out with. I actually talk a lot about that when I do speaking events, or when I even talk on my YouTube channel. It's like, put yourself around others that you want to emulate. And when I was younger and getting in trouble, I knew that at that age I needed to find a different group of people, you know, because my mom would always say, tell me who you hang out with, I'll tell you who you are." And I really didn't understand it until I got in trouble.
yeah. That is such a beautiful quote. Like it
Yeah,
it it really is. And it allows you to have insight into what you're accepting as your normal
hmm,
when you take a look at that. So if you want to conquer cancer, you need to put yourself in rooms where other people are doing that, right?
yeah,
um and interact with other survivors who have the winning mentality. I'm not saying that you can think your way through cancer. Like that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can absolutely determine how you're going to approach the situation and how you're going to handle it. You can't control the situation. You can only control how you respond to it. And if you want to stew in your poop, you can do that. Like,
got you. No, of
but
course,
what
I
is that?
completely
How
agree.
does that help you? How does that help you? And I definitely did that in my youth, right? And
Yeah,
and occasionally I still do.
yeah,
But I'm actually going through a health challenge right now, and I've spoken about it with my listeners. Back in December, I went from my routine PAP and from my routine mammo, and the mammo came back with spots of concerns on both my breasts. My follow up appointment is a week from today. So in the middle of January, this is going to be aired way after that,
yeah.
and they're doing a diagnostic mammogram and possibly an ultrasound. Um, However, they scheduled it so that the there will be a doctor there, so that after the radiology technician looks at it, I will have answers immediately on whether
That's great.
there's further concerns
That's great.
or what next steps are. This is not the first time that one of my mammograms has done that. About 7 years ago, I had a mammogram come back abnormal, and it turned out to be a rowdy lymph node. However, how I handled it 7 years ago, I honestly, I lost my biscuits. I really did. I did not handle it mentally very well. I was stressed the entire time. I ate my feelings. I couldn't sleep. I was miserable. I am having some sleep issues now,
Hmm.
but I'm choosing to meditate and do breath work and walk around with crystals in my bra and sound healing and Reiki and stuff like that. And all of that has helped for the last 3 weeks. My mentality has been really good. The last couple of days I haven't slept very well, and I know that it's because of the stress. So I have to figure out some other methods in order to. It's just another week. I
Yeah.
know I can get there without stressing myself to heck and back, you know.
Yeah, of course.
So
Well, you'll definitely be in my prayers. I thank you for sharing that with me. And
thank you.
yeah, and one of the things I found out, you're talking about breathing that has helped me. Have you ever listened to the podcast called the Huberman Lab? No,
No,
I can't. Is it Daniel Huberman? I'm probably getting his first name wrong, but it's called the Huberman Lab podcast. He's a scientist out of Stanford. Anyways, I saw this short. My older brother loves listening to him, and he's been on Joe Rogan and stuff. And I like listening to him too. But I found a short, on Instagram, and he was saying breathing. When you breathe in, he says, do this 3 times. If you start to feel stress, he goes, when you breathe in, go take that little extra breath to fill those
extra breath.
pockets in your lungs, and then you breathe out. He said do it 3 times, and he says and it does something with your sacs in your lungs, then of course does something hormonally, but it brings the stress levels down. And
Yes.
now it's not going to make it to where you have like this euphoric, I've done it. I'm not like this. I don't have like euphoric sense of, oh my god, like it's rainbows outside, but I do feel a lift, and so that's something, if you haven't tried it, if you want just another tool in that coping box of yours.
Absolutely. I have actually heard that before and have used that technique.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact science behind it, but I think Gary Brecka talks about it too. I don't know
Okay.
if you've heard about him, the Ultimate Human podcast.
Oh, okay. I'll look that
Yeah.
up.
Gary Brecka is incredible. He's a human biologist, and
Okay.
he talks a lot about health and wellness, and he is quite an incredible individual.
Yes, I know Gary Brickett. He just did what should we call it with Dana White. I think that was the guy that just did a 72-hour fast, and he told Dana White, don't do all liquid, do like liquid, like a liquid with electrolytes, like your first 2 days, and then or the first 24 hours, and after that just take bone broth with your stuff, so he's not losing minerals or something like that, but then the bone broth helps with protein and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it shredded him in like 72 hours. So yeah.
Yeah. Gary Brecka does the gene testing, and then he
Yes.
talks
Yes.
about what of the 5 or 6 um genes that actionable genes, and whether or not you're methylating your nutrients correctly. I highly recommend doing that. I'll put my link in the show notes for that, because
Okay.
I got I did do the gene test, and I have the common one, the MTF, whatever, the one everybody calls them a fucking gene. Um, that 40% of Americans have as a broken gene, and what it basically means is that we don't methylate folate correctly, and what
Really?
methylate means is transition it from the raw form into how our body absorbs it.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's super cool, super cool. Gary Brecka is part of the reason I've lost 75 pounds in the last 70 last month, year and a half,
That's awesome.
with the gene test and the blood work, and then getting onto the right supplements, and amazing. I could talk about him all day.
That's great.
When I went through my cancer journey, I did not address any of my nutrition. And I'm addressing it now, and I have been addressing it for the last like 2 years, and I've really made a lot of strides. So if I end up with another diagnosis, I am in a much better physical form and mental form. If that is a challenge I have to re go through,
Yeah.
let's hope not, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely not. Yeah.
but
Pray not.
yeah, so it does, like, where your mind sits
Yeah.
really does affect everything. There are studies that talk about how anger and sadness affect your immune system. I have to
Hmm.
go find these because I don't have them at the tips of my fingers, but it's something like if you're mad for 5 minutes, it your immune system doesn't work at optimal levels for like 6 hours.
I could see that. Wow. Yeah, I mean, you look at the happiest place, the places that get them, and you're talking about that, like it only makes sense, right? Like when you get sun, or you work out, the hormones and the vitamins that your body gets to make you feel better, right? The endorphins and so forth. And then when you're in an area that's maybe, I know you're in Jersey, so there's definitely times where, you know, you're not getting the sunlight, right? It's kind of just, gray and stuff. And I have a friend that moved to Iowa some years back, and she's back in Texas now. But her and her husband, went to Iowa, and she said she was the type of person that runs outside and does triathlons. And she had said her first winter there, she may became super depressed, and she didn't know how to handle it. Luckily, her mother-in-law kind of helped her through it because she was always used to being outside and getting that, that vitamin D and so forth. And so, but you're completely right, And then you got to think to yourself what you're talking about now, like, for me it's a little gray outside today around the Austin area, but for the most part, like there's a lot of sun. We'll be outside and doing stuff, but you got to think about then you're in areas like where you're at, right? And if you're not used to, like what can you do aside from even going outside because it might not feel as great then. Now the fresh air always feels great, but like when you don't get that sun or when you're not around other people that maybe are as positive as you or optimistic as you'd like them to be, and then for you, let's say it's hard for you if you're that person, right? Like, so Tonya, you're that person that's kind of had a mind shift, right? You've had a mind setting shift. Now you got to be careful with yourself not to be that person that's always exerting your energy for others, right? So where you're not feeding and feeding and feeding and they're just taking to where you're not being allowed to feed back, right? And then it's one of those things. I had there was a guy I used to hang out with for like 6 years, and I was transitioning, I was starting over in a sense. I went through a divorce. I had moved back to Central Texas. I was, in the West Texas area working in the oil field, and I came back and just want to plant roots down here where I'm from. When I get my daughter, she knows she has roots here and so forth. And I start hanging out with this guy I go to school with. And, he was in a sense kind of transitioning in life too. He was out of the Navy for a few years. He was having some mental health issues, I guess. And so he was trying to get back on his feet and more of an emotional aspect. So we kind of leaned on each other. Then I kind of start feeling within a year into it that like it started becoming a very one-sided friendship, right? Where I was always listening to him, right? And I was like, hey man, and I started doing a boot camp around that time, right? So hey man, come to the boot camp, no charge for you, just come to help your self-esteem and to help your confidence and get those endorphins going. And then it was always like, oh, well, if there's something else going on, like Ross is on the back burner, right? Like, so by year 6, I remember we were hanging out one day, and I was, hey man, like, this month, 6 years ago, we were in the same area, and we were talking about where we're going to be at. And since then, I've gotten remarried. I've had a son, working on a career. I'm, kind of doing this. I'm not saying like I'm super successful, but I've kind of taken a step in my life, taking step after step,
Yes.
rebuilding my life and transitioning from what it was. And I was like, I was like, and you're kind of in the, as you're in the exact same spot, other than a college degree, you're a year and a half outside of that college degree and you've done nothing with it. You're still living the same type of life. I said, and it feels like unless you're talking about your problems, if I'm trying to say, hey, can I vent to you? It's not reciprocated. So what I'm trying to say is, if I'm not rubbing off on you, you've got to be rubbing off on me somehow.
And it
And
goes back to the you are the people you hang out with.
exactly. Now, of course, he was like, oh, like, no, I don't want. And it wasn't but maybe 2 months after that, like our friendship completely just dissipated.
Yeah,
Right. And
because he realized that he wasn't contributing.
yeah. So, our friendship dissipated. And then, then I found out from, other acquaintances and friends of ours that, even through our quote unquote, I guess, relationship and friendship, he, definitely, and maybe it was envy, maybe it was jealousy or something like that, but he definitely didn't say the best things behind my back. And I was the type of guy that always would, hey, come to our family event here, come and hang out here. I had my kids calling him uncle, something like that, right? And so just kind of like what Morgan Freeman says, right? God takes those out of your life because he was hearing conversations you weren't in, right?
I,
So
yes, and you know, you cannot every relationship there's an energy exchange.
yeah.
There has to be. It, not I don't want to say that it's transactional, but there has to be and there has to be a give and take. And it cannot be a one way because it
No,
doesn't work because there
no.
there will be resentments, and usually the taker is the one that realizes that they're the taker, and as soon as the giver says something the taker gets offended, right? um or I just there just has to be, right? Like
Yeah,
it is how we function in society
yeah,
with give and take, and some people are not willing to level themselves up, to do the inner work, to become better humans. And sometimes they spend their entire life not doing that, and sometimes it's just for short periods, right? And I think we all go through lulls,
yeah,
where we're not working on ourselves. But I personally feel that it's super important to continually at least step in the right direction, um, just to be a better human.
yeah.
And part of my journey, I've been on this planet for a few revolutions of the sun, and I have learned that some people do not want your help, and that's really hard because I like to help people, and you have to get up to a point where you can discern when that is, right? And then just step away. And it's hard, right? Like, it's sometimes I'll say in the beginning it felt like I was abandoning people, but I had to look at it like they're not going to accept my help, so I'm going to go help somebody who wants my help, right? Who needs my help and wants my help. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And that is a huge thing, especially so if you're going through a diagnosis and you have friends in your circle that you're hoping to rely on, and you have friends like this, some of them are going to step away, and that is not a reflection on you. Whether they can't handle your diagnosis or they're not equipped to help you, that's okay. There are people out there that want to help you and will help you.
Yeah.
One of the I keep hearing from survivors, and it's true for me as well. You will find some of the best people on the planet when you're dealing with cancer, when you're going through this, whether it's nurses or doctors or hospital staff or your friends, your community, whether you go to like whatever your spiritual community is. I, People will come out of the woodwork to bring you casseroles and to bring you books and to ask you if you need things. Some of them are going to be awkward as all get out when they do it, but the compassion that you see from humanity when you're going through one of the most horrible experiences of your life really does show that people are generally good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like in when you go, they say it all the time, right? When you're going through something, right? You have a lot of friends when things are good, right? You have a lot of friends when things are good and life is fun, and you see those that have your back when things are tough,
Yeah.
right? Right, and you see those, and it's like either like you said, right? Whether somebody can't handle it, or or they don't know how to maybe even like approach it, right? You have those people, right? And I get it. They'll still, hey, what's going on? You'll know who has your back with those that just really don't care either, right? Like
Yes.
it's not because they won't even check in on you. They're like, oh, that sucks. And a lot of times what you know about those type of people are, you could say, hey, I've been diagnosed with cancer, and you're talking about it. And when you're able to talk to somebody one on one about something, especially in today's world, I'm gonna kind of show you, like me and you are talking. This is what you're gonna see, and to you, it's very important. And this is what you'll see. Yeah, and I have my phone in my hand right now. That's what I'm doing. Oh yeah. Then in a few minutes, they'll kind of interject themselves, and they'll turn this conversation around onto themselves. Like, man, this reminds me of when I was going through blah 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 blah. To bring it to where they want your energy back, because they're not. If you've noticed in that conversation, they won't give you theirs, right?
Yep.
Right? Like you're talking to me, you're telling me you've been diagnosed. They're not giving you their energy. They're waiting for an opening to take your energy back. And the thing is
Yes.
when you come to those people in situations like we're talking about, real fast, especially if you're very emotionally aware, right? And you have that emotional recall, on how you've been treated. Real fast, okay, this isn't the type of person. And I've done it. I stopped the conversation. I actually went, I told you before what I'm going through as far as before the podcast started. And I actually went and had a quote unquote a dinner with somebody, and they really weren't about the conversation. I could tell. Talking about. I literally stopped what I was talking about. I finished my dinner. Okay. That person got up, and he went walking around and mingling in this restaurant for a few minutes. And finally, when I was done, I cashed out. I said, I'm heading out. He said, oh, no, 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 man, just mingle. I said, no, I'm going. And then he like ran me down when I was at the door, and he's like, hey, dude, like, you want to go somewhere and talk? And to me, I was like, that's already been said and done. Like that time has passed, right? Because you made me feel like I wasn't important enough to talk about that. But I'm sitting there and you're regurgitating all of your issues onto me, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I was like, no, that time kind of passed for me. Now I will say the good thing that happened though is I think he reflected on himself, because he reached out to me the next day and said, I need to be a better friend. You're talking about so I will say, like, there was definitely some self-reflection there. And I praise that. And I know he's going through some stuff too, and we don't go through the same things in life. Where we live different lifestyles. So I can see how he can't relate or empathize. But for him just to, for my emotional recall, I was like, okay, I'm stopping. I'm gonna stop. I'm not, for him to be a self-aware and say, hey, and now he's reaching out to help. That's telling me, okay, you're talking about a lull. He had a lull in himself at that time, and that's totally because he came back, and hey, that's great. But
It is.
we've also had those to where those people, you just like, what, I'm gonna see. I probably even hear from them again unless I run into them, right, from this
Right.
situation. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But like some people, like when they can't handle what you're going through, it
yeah,
could be because somebody in their past had cancer,
yep,
and then and they just can't They just don't have the emotional spoons to handle it.
Oh yeah.
It's not that they don't love you. They just cannot do it because of they haven't worked through the grief of the loss of their loved one.
I completely agree.
And that's valid. And whether or not you reconnect later is completely up to you.
Mm-hmm.
But and you don't necessarily know, right? Like when people distance themselves, you don't always know. And it could be like you could take it as an insult, and they don't mean it as that. Some people just don't have the capacity to give when you are in a time of need, and that's okay, because there are plenty of people out there that absolutely do. And I swear some of those people will surprise the hell out of you,
Oh yeah.
because you you would have never imagined that this person would step up and be the superhero of your story when you absolutely can't do anything for yourself.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, it's really hard to accept, like be on the receiving end of the care, because we've been trained and conditioned to be self-sufficient and be our own island, when in fact humans, we need community. We are like, it takes a village to raise a Tanya. I say that all the time. I believe it, right? Because I can't do everything by myself. I can do a lot of things. I'm super strong Wonder Woman myself, right? But nobody can. Nobody can do everything, right?
No.
And society has made it so that we don't ask for help because it's looked down on to ask for help, to need help. You know, for instance, when people have to have food stamps or other benefits, they're looked down on. Are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
Yeah.
Disability didn't pay me for 4 freaking months.
Mm-hmm.
I was on food stamps. I'm not ashamed to say that. I pay my taxes. I put into the system. Why can't I take out when I need it? And there are some people that need to be on there for a lot longer, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But the whole mentality where we're taught to not uh be nice about people who need help is gross. If you ask
Yeah.
me, it's really
I,
gross.
yeah. I think and it is because you're right. Human nature, like just look through human history. It's always been those that are the closest knit, right? You've always had the communities, the villages, the city states, the countries, right? And when they all have a common goal, they succeed. Look at my wife is a first generation American. Her family's from Portugal. And she told me when we met and moved down here, she's like, man, I really didn't have friends. I had my family. She's a super large Portuguese family, right? And I have and that's the difference is my family from let's just say my mom's side. I was raised more around my mom's people and my dad's people, but my mom's people came from Mexico in 1905, and in this area I'm in now, and and we're not that close, right? Like in the sense of like during holidays we don't really get together, right? Like we're kind of everybody kind of does their thing with their immediate family. And you're right about society because our Western society has pushed us to where we are isolated, right? You remember at one time there was a nuclear family, right? And then even and a lot of societies have it to where the grandparents still live with them, right? Look at the Asian cultures, right? Indians, Chinese, all them, their parents still live with them. And the thing is, a lot of Hispanic cultures and Mexican culture, Latin cultures do the same thing still. But in Western, you start becoming westernized, that's less and less shown. And then we're so busy, right? Like you go to other countries, they have like times where they're not even like open at restaurants or cafes. They have times where they're like hanging out and they're just napping. I worked in the oil field, right? I worked in the oil field for a few years, and you would have these things called roustabout crews. And roustabout crews were a group of guys. They go fix everything. They were like the little, hey, I need this fixed. Okay, we'll be out there. A lot of times they were guys from straight up Mexico. And man, I'll tell you what, between 12 and 2, you weren't going to see them. They were hanging out on some piece of land, or they were hanging out on an oil rig, and they were napping. They had their lunch, and then they were going to take a siesta, and then we'll get back to work. Right? And so,
Yeah.
and so our society, but our society is like, so then, hey, Tanya, you're going through this cancer treatment, this, and man, like, man, I'm too, man, I would love to, but I'm too busy, right? I mean, you see it with our kids, right? It came to a point to where I think we talked about this, a few weeks ago we were chit chatting, and we talked about when we were growing up, we'd be outside to play. Well, now because nobody's really outside anymore because of games and parents are no, don't go outside. Kids don't want to be outside. We have to put our kids in activities. So now what does that do to us? Now that makes us even more busier, right?
Yep.
To where as
Yep.
parents, there is no hey, go outside and play. And maybe I'll call Tanya, see what she's up to, or hey, let's go to Tanya's house and we'll play over there. It's like, hey, Tanya, I can't. I have practice or I have a tournament or I have to go out of town, right? So so and the society has done that to us to feel not only looking down on some things, but the fact is I just don't have time. And to be honest, you're so busy. Sometimes there's a sense of I don't care because I need to focus on me.
Yep.
And when it comes, I've been on food stamps too. Well, not in my adult life, but when I was a child, my parents were, and it kind of comes to the point to where like you get around those that you're like, I don't think a lot of times it's even people being mean because you have to, in a sense, let other people know if you are taking assistance. But I think there's also a lot of people because of that mentality that it's like I don't want to let people know this that I have to ask for help, and so
Yeah.
you're holding that in, and you'll only talk about with those that are going through what you're going through, which is totally fine too. But our society has played these type of games with us. But that's where I
Yes.
talk about in my public speaking thing is what what do what in your life have you had to overcome or say, hey, I want to do this or I don't want to be here. And that's where the resilience and overcoming aspect of my speeches kind of come in.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. So why don't you let the audience know how they can find you? Like where, what is your
Yeah.
website?
So my website is War Room, like War Room, right? So warroomspeakersclub.com, right? Real simple, one word, warroomspeakersclub.com. That's my website. You'll see it. And from there, it'll have all of the little icons. You click those icons, it'll go to all my links to my social media sites and my email and so forth. And that's how you can communicate with me. But I think I have my phone number on there. So you can communicate with me all through that by going to that website, warroomspeakersclub.com.
Fantastic. And I will make sure to put it in the show notes.
Thanks.
Ross, this has been an amazing conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on to the show and having a conversation with me today.
No, no worries. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on here.
You're welcome. And all right. Well, until our next conversation, Cancer Warriors, go out and get your testing, your annual tests, schedule them and do them. Bye.